So, last Sunday, I attended a Zen Buddhist retreat, which was a new experience for me. Now, the word retreat might be conjuring up some sort of elaborate image in your mind, but it was a purely urban retreat, which basically means it was a room inside a studio, a fairly featureless room. No, we weren't in a temple with beautiful gardens and everything like that. It wasn't anything like that. So this was in Belfast, which is about 25 miles from where I live. And the real draw for me was that the retreat was being hosted by my favorite author on spirituality, Brad Warner. If he hadn't have been involved, I probably wouldn't have went. And that's no reflection on the place, it's just a reflection on my own lack of outgoing nature, my own introversion. It's just the way I am. I kind of needed that. I needed that something extra to get me motivated to go, and that was Brad Warner. So I'll tell you about the day. That was the start of his European tour for his new book, which is called Don't Be a Jerk. Doesn't look like a Buddhist book, does it? But it is. And he was kind enough to autograph it for me. That's how Brad Warner does autographs. Okay? Which is cool. He has that playful side to himself, which is something that I really appreciate in a person. People who are overly serious suffer more from pretentiousness, I think. Anyway, let me talk about the day. It was from 10 a.m. to 4:30, so I arrived nice and early at the studio, and I'm the first person to arrive, and I click on the door buzzer, but there's nobody there yet, so I have to wait. So, one of the members arrives, and I get to say hello and meet somebody, and in we go. He seems to be one of the prominent members, so he was able to let me know about the etiquette of the Zendo, if I can use that word. The etiquette of their particular group, which meant that I wouldn't be bumbling around all over the place. I did know a thing or two about Buddhism, about Zen beforehand. I mean, I know how to sit in the Zazen position, the meditation position. But he told me a few things about walking meditation, which Kinhin, I think it's called, and just about the bows and the slightly religious-y elements that would be incorporated into the day. So I'm in the studio, and a few other people are coming in, and yeah, everybody was friendly and everything, but people generally just want to go to their position at the edge of the room and sit down and start meditating even before the day begins proper at 10 a.m. So it's maybe about 10 minutes to, and the room is already filling up with people who just go and face the wall and get into the lotus position. So Zen meditation, you don't face each other, you don't face the room, you face the wall. Zen meditation is about minimizing stimulation of the senses. So that's why that's done. It's very much a solitary activity. But it felt a bit odd for me. I didn't really want to start the meditation session until the gong rang, but everybody was just starting, so I just went with it. And I wanted to meet Brad Warner. he hadn't arrived yet. So it was kind of strange for me. I sat down and started meditating. And by meditating, I just mean you look at the wall. There really is nothing much mental to Zen meditation other than just observing your own mind as it does its thing. We'll talk more about that in a moment perhaps. But anyway, I'm sitting there looking at the wall, and I can hear people coming in behind me. And you can't really look around because you're not supposed to. So, and bear in mind also, I have attended day 2 of the event. I did not attend the previous day. So I guess there might have been some introductions and things that I missed out on. But anyway, after a while I hear the gong being rung, or the bell, or whatever you call it. And that signifies the meditation session beginning proper. And of course, everything suddenly goes quiet and you can hear a pin drop. And I'm sitting there facing the wall and I'm thinking, my favorite author is somewhere in the room behind me and I can't turn around. And I won't be able to turn around for maybe an hour or more. Now they were going to break up the meditation. It was going to be a half-hour meditation followed by 10 minutes of walking meditation and back again for another half hour of seated meditation. So anyway, there I am, and I think, well, okay, let's just go with this. I was hesitant, you see. The reason I only attended one of the days was because it was a 6.5 hour retreat, and I knew that a large part of that was going to be spent meditating. And I didn't know if I was ready for that, because I've read a lot about Zen Buddhism. I really appreciate the way that Brad Warner thinks, but I don't have a lot of personal practice to speak of, let's be honest. So I didn't know if I'd be able to do something like this. So I let go of the Saturday and I just attended the Sunday. So anyway, there I am sitting there. It's quiet. After a while, I hear someone start to cough behind me. And it's clear that whoever it is, he's got a cold or something. And he's trying hard not to cough, but of course that just means in a few minutes he has to let out a really big cough. And he's probably thinking that he's being very disruptive to everything. And it doesn't bother me at all, really. I just sort of thought, the poor guy, whoever he was. And so after a while, I hear this guy get up and leave. So I'm kind of thinking, I don't feel so bad now about being so fidgety and everything. But no, actually it was okay. It wasn't too bad, sitting on the little cushion and everything. So the bell rings in half an hour, signifying that we all stand up and start walking around the room very, very slowly, doing kinhin, walking meditation. You basically have your hand like this and you walk very, very slowly. So that was my first opportunity really to look at my surroundings, even though of course I should have been concentrating entirely on the walking meditation. But bear in mind, this is my first time in any kind of surroundings like this. So I'm kind of wanting to look around and think, okay, where's Brad Warner? He's not in the room. I can't see him anywhere. And I think, is he the guy who was doing all the coughing? And I found out later that yes, poor Brad had the cold. So anyway, we do our 10 minutes walking meditation, and I could have taken more than 10 minutes because it's a welcome relief after the stiffness that gets into your limbs from all the sitting. But it's straight back into sitting meditation again for another half hour. And I didn't know the schedule of the day. I didn't know how long this was going to go on for. But after the 2 sessions of zazen, 2 sessions of sitting, there were some ceremonial aspects. Brad Warner was sitting in his position, and he was just sitting there with his Godzilla t-shirt on and his jeans, whereas most of the other people were dressed informally, but there was a strong emphasis on black in the clothes that people wore. But I like the way Brad Warner just doesn't care. But there was a more formalized part, and he went into a side room to put on some robes over what he was wearing, and there was some chanting and some bows and whatnot. All very unfamiliar to me, but I just went with it. So Then we had a Dharma talk, and this is what I really came for, to hear Brad Warner speak and have maybe some kind of question and answer session. So that was really interesting. He spoke mostly about rebirth, about whether rebirth actually happens or not, and we got to talking about all sorts of things, including the paranormal, and that was good. That was a chance to interact with him. After that, I can't remember if we did another session of meditation or not, but when we broke for lunch, everybody filed very ceremoniously out of the room, and then the atmosphere sort of lightened a little, and everybody was chatty, and I found myself standing in the corridor directly opposite Brad, and I just introduced myself, and we got talking, which I thought was fantastic. I'm not the sort of person who gets starstruck, really, but I have to confess to being a little bit starstruck. But at the same time, part of the attraction to this particular author is that I know he's just an ordinary person. I know that because of the raw honesty that he brings into his books, the raw honesty about his personal experiences. That is not something that I feel when I read someone like Deepak Chopra or even Eckhart Tolle. Brad is he's not pretending to have some kind of special state of consciousness, and he's not presenting himself as a person who has that to make you sort of desire that. Does that make any sense? And I think that kind of honesty might be the reason why he'll probably never be as successful as somebody like Eckhart Tolle, because crowds of people flood to teachers who promise spectacular things, who promise really more than they can actually deliver, but then that just keeps the people hanging on. So it's often said that, don't meet your personal heroes because it will shatter your illusions about them. In this case, that did not happen, and I knew it wouldn't happen because I didn't have any illusions about him. I just expected him to be an ordinary guy, and that's exactly what he was. And nobody else was treating him as anything special, which just made the conversations much more natural. If anything, if there was something a bit weird about it, it was the incongruity between the fact that I knew so much about him because of his openness in his books, yet he knew so little about me. I was a complete stranger to him. So maybe that was kind of disconcerting for him, for me to be so familiar with him right off the bat. I don't know, but it was good to meet him. So we had lunch together, and this room, there was only about 12 people there. And it felt incredible to me that I got to meet the one spiritual teacher, if I can call him that, among all the spiritual teachers that are out there. I got to meet him in such an intimate circumstance with only a few people around. That was just incredible. You would not get that with Eckhart Tolle. He would be there in a room full of 2,000 people. So, after lunch, it was back to more meditation, both seating and walking. I had opportunity to avail of something that they called Dokusan, is that what they call it? I may be getting that slightly wrong. It's basically, it allows you to have a one-to-one conversation with the teacher. Brad Warner is in a dimly lit room off to the side. The rest of us are all meditating, and at some point someone will come and tap me on the shoulder, and that's my signal to go in for Dokusan with Brad Warner. Dokusan is it's designed that you talk about your practice, your own meditation practice, ask him any questions, share experiences, that sort of thing. And even though I have not much meditation practice to speak of, I did have some things I wanted to talk about, particularly the experiences of meditation that I performed back when I was a Christian. How it was, I did something very like Zazen for a period when I was a Christian, and I did it without being taught. And I have talked about that in a previous video. What was that video called? If you care to look it up. I think it's called Spiritual Experiences as a Christian, and it's in 2 parts. If you use the search button on my page, you'll be able to look at that. So I just really wanted to get some clarification about that with Brad and talk about a few other things. And being in a dimly lit room, just him on his cushion, me on my cushion, it's very conducive to being open with a person, both him and me. So that was good. Then it was back to more meditation again, while other people have their session of Dokusan. And then eventually the bell rings at 4:30 and it's the end of the day. So there's quite a lengthy period of meditation from after lunch to 4:30. I completely lost track of how often we had stood and sat. It all just blurred after a while. Yes, there's some degree of impatience involved in it because the mind does what it does. But I really have to say that I found the whole experience easier than I thought it would be. And if anything, Brad Warner had prepared me for how hard it would be in his books, where he talks about his own experiences of excruciating boredom when doing Zazen. No, well, yeah, maybe a little bit. The mind has an awful tendency to wander, and but then you just kind of pull yourself back and start observing the mind again, and that's really a large part of what Zazen is about. Understanding that you are not your mind. The self, whatever that is not the mind. In ordinary everyday consciousness, you are carried along by the thoughts in your mind and you self-identify with those thoughts. But when sitting Zazen, it becomes easier to make the discovery that you are not your mind. So, once you make that discovery, I suppose the question is, why sit Zazen then? Why continue? Because it's so easy to forget. You continue the practice because the more you do it, the more you can bring that kind of awareness into day-to-day life. Because the mind just wants you to it wants to take your awareness and carry it along with itself. And if that's happening while you're meditating, how much more is it happening while you're not meditating? Yeah. I did a half-hour meditation before starting this video, and it was difficult. It was much more difficult than it was in that public setting with other people, because I wondered, if Zazen is such a solitary activity, why do it with other people? If you're going to get together with other people, why not get together just to have Dharma talks and whatnot? Why do Zazen? But I found that doing it with other people enforces a discipline among you, because you can't just fidget when you feel like it, because there's a certain amount of self-consciousness or a certain amount of... It's just other people have expectations of you that you don't want to break, if that makes sense. Everybody's doing it this way, so there's this reinforcement from everybody just to sit there and not move about and not fidget. Of course, sometimes you just have to get up and maybe go to the toilet or something. That can't be helped, of course, so you just do it. But for the most part, there's very little motion, and the only sound you can hear are sounds that come from outside. Yeah, it was a good experience. I was kind of, I was really buzzing at the end of the day, actually. in part mostly because I had met a favourite author, but also because I liked the people as well, and I was feeling something that I hadn't felt for a long time, which was that the feeling of spiritual community, the feeling of interacting with like minds. You see, I used to really appreciate that for a time when I was a Christian. I say for a time because my Christian experience was up and down, but there was a period around my mid-20s where spiritual community through church was a really vibrant, warm thing. You know, everybody was vibing with the same sort of outlook on life. Friendships felt very warm. We went and did things together as well as just attending the meetings. We had breaks together on days out. And when I stopped being a Christian, nothing ever really replaced that sense of community. I really missed it, but there was no going back to it because I just didn't think the way those people thought, and that was happening long before I stopped being a Christian. I stopped church long before I stopped being a Christian because I could not relate to the mindset anymore. I was going to church, listening to sermons, thinking, I don't agree with this. You know, Christianity was on the way out of my life, and it wasn't really a sudden thing. It was happening in stages. So anyway, I lost my sense of I lost spiritual community. And that's hard on someone like me who's single. Particularly single and without a family of any kind, except for cousins and uncles. No mother, no father, no children, no wife, no brothers or sisters. So I got the sense that here it was just waiting for me to discover, but it was Zen Buddhism. Brad was, a few days later, on Wednesday, Brad was to speak at another Zen gathering in Newcastle, which is on the east coast of Northern Ireland. I know the town very well. So I attended that also, which is about an hour's drive on a motorcycle. Newcastle Zen was much more informal, less religious-y perhaps than Belfast Zen. And again, I really liked the people that I met, particularly one guy, I forget his name, a big tall guy that I got on really well with, and we had a mutual interest in motorcycles. But also we got into some quite deep conversation about Zen. So the bottom line here is I'm going to start going to these places. I don't have to be without spiritual community in my life anymore. It just took somebody like Brad Warner to indirectly to get me off my ass and actually attend one of these things. So they're quite far away from where I live, so I don't think I'm going to be someone who attends every week. But when I can, I'm going to grab the motorcycle and go down, and I'm going to sit zazen with these people and enjoy Dharma talks and enjoy the community of like minds. So I want that to be an encouragement to anyone listening. If you're in my kind of position where you're an ex-Christian and you're kind of feeling that sense of isolation or loneliness, that people don't think the way you think, and you just miss that connection to other human beings who are like you, maybe you need to look for a Zen Buddhist group somewhere near you, and there probably is one if you look. Does it have to be Zen Buddhism? No, of course not. Doesn't really. And I don't really self-identify as a Buddhist necessarily, but I do find that there's very little I disagree with in Brad Warner's particular philosophy. His outlook on life is as close to mine as any any author that I have found. Alan Watts would probably be the other one, but he's dead. Yeah. So also, Brad, I want to give a bit of a plug to Brad as well. His latest book, Don't Be a Jerk. I've got all of his books on the shelf up there. I recommend them all. A good one to start with is maybe Sit Down and Shut Up, because it has I'd say it has the most varied content of all of his books. But yeah, if you go to hardcorezen.info, you will see the remainder of the schedule for his European tour. I think at the moment he's just finished Dublin and he's heading over to England. So if you're anywhere close to him, maybe you want to check him out and attend part of his tour. All right, folks. Talk to you later. Bye.